Did you ever wake up after a party or a restaurant feeling like your joints are on fire? Are your rheumatoid arthritis symptoms suddenly worse with unbearable pain, swelling, and stiffness? Have you ever wondered if the food that you ate the night before has any connection with the sudden worsening of your rheumatoid arthritis? This video will answer you all of these questions. I will teach you the foods that can cause a rheumatoid arthritis flare-up, from the least toxic to the worst of them. I'm Dr. Girnita, a rheumatologist with more than 15 years of experience who treats patients with rheumatoid arthritis every day. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease that affects millions of people all around the world. It can cause pain, stiffness, and a lot of joint deformities if it's not diagnosed in time or if it's not treated appropriately. But besides medications, which is actually very advanced today, my patients will always ask me about natural ways of treating arthritis. And over the last 10 years, I have constantly researched the topic of nutrition and other lifestyle intervention. The answer is that yes, nutrition is scientifically proven to help people with rheumatoid arthritis. And only now, after 10 years of me talking about this topic, I have seen that the American College of Rheumatology released lifestyle guidelines to support these lifestyle interventions for patients with rheumatoid arthritis. But not even those guidelines are very strongly recommended. So I'm here to tell you that eating the right things, the right foods, will decrease the pain, the swelling, the stiffness, and inflammation, and it will heal your gut. So let's begin our countdown of the foods that could sabotage you. Number 10, Nightshade vegetables. Let me share a fascinating story about one of my patients who thought she had developed rheumatoid arthritis. The patient came to me with all the classic symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis: joint pain, swelling in her hands, and hours of morning stiffness. We got labs, but the labs were negative for rheumatoid arthritis. But it was clear to me that she was dealing with inflammation. And after talking to her about what are the things that she eats, she told me that she recently grew a lot of tomatoes, and because she did not want to waste them, she was eating a lot of them. But I mean a lot, in salads, stews, sauces, almost every day. So my reaction was, why don't you try to eliminate them for the next months, and then we will see each other again. So when she came back in about 6 weeks after her first visit with me, she had no more symptoms, no more pain, no more stiffness, and no inflammation. Which are the Nightshade vegetables? They include tomatoes, white potatoes, eggplants, and bell peppers or hot peppers. These vegetables contain solanine, and this is a compound that can trigger inflammation in some people that are sensitive to solanine. While not everyone with rheumatoid arthritis needs to eliminate nightshades, research suggests that about 20% of arthritis patients report that they do have improved symptoms when they avoid these foods. My advice: you should consider a 30-day elimination trial to see if nightshades affect your symptoms. Number 9, artificial sweeteners. Some of my patients will tell me that they made a healthy choice and now they are using sugar-free foods. But is this healthy? Let's look at what science tells us about artificial sweeteners. Actually, they can disrupt your gut microbiome. They can lead to increased intestinal permeability, or what we call the leaky gut. They will also increase inflammatory markers, and some artificial sweeteners, particularly aspartame, have been linked with increased risk for cancer and autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. So instead of choosing artificial sweeteners, opt out for natural sweeteners like honey or maple syrup in small quantities, or even better, train your taste buds to enjoy less sweetness overall. Number 8, dairy products. Did you know that 65% of the global population has some form of lactose intolerance? Here it is what research tells us about dairy and rheumatoid arthritis. Casein is a protein that can trigger inflammatory responses, and you find that in dairy. Lactose intolerance can cause gut inflammation, and commercial dairy often contains added hormones and antibiotics. However, not all dairy is problematic, because there are studies that show that certain dairy products like plain yogurt, natural kefir, and unprocessed cheese in moderation can be beneficial. The key is to eat minimally processed dairy products if you decide to include them in your diet. Number 7, alcohol. I'm not encouraging anyone to drink alcohol in excess. However, there are some studies that show that those people that adopt a Mediterranean diet in the Mediterranean countries who drink 1 glass of red wine, only one, every day, they have beneficial effects because the red wine is high in polyphenols and antioxidants. But drinking more than 1 glass or drinking heavily like hard liquor can cause gut microbiome alteration and can cause inflammation and leaky gut. It can also interfere with the metabolism of common medications that you take for rheumatoid arthritis like methotrexate. And it will increase the liver stress when you combine alcohol with methotrexate. Alcohol disrupts sleep patterns, leading to increased inflammation. And it could increase inflammatory markers by up to 30%. The consequences are huge, and the consequences will be that you will end up with more joint pain and stiffness if you suffer from rheumatoid arthritis. Number 6, gluten-containing grains. Most patients will ask me if gluten is bad or good. My answer is this. For those of you with a gluten intolerance or gluten sensitivity, gluten is a bad thing. But it all begins in the colon. In the gut, there are thousands of enzymes that break down the food that we eat. And protease is just one of these enzymes. And its job is to break down the gluten that we eat. Those of you with intolerance or sensitivity to gluten, you have a genetic mutation and that gene doesn't work correctly, which will leave the gluten undigested. And this undigested gluten will cause inflammation, will affect the lining of your gut, and will trigger an inflammatory response. Unfortunately, there are no good tests available to determine whether you are sensitive to gluten or not. We do, however, do some tests for celiac disease, but the best test to determine whether you are or you are not gluten sensitive is to eliminate gluten and track your symptoms. The most common symptoms of gluten sensitivity or intolerance are abdominal pain, cramping, bloating, diarrhea, rashes, headaches, and joint pain. What about gluten and rheumatoid arthritis? While gluten may not be the cause or the only cause of your inflammation, there are some studies that show that those people with rheumatoid arthritis that adopt a gluten-free diet will benefit from this. Those that adopted a gluten-free diet, in some studies, they show to have less pain and lower markers of inflammation. And the goal will be to consume less gluten or to incorporate more gluten-free whole grains like quinoa, brown rice, or red rice, buckwheat, corn, and gluten-free oats. My advice is to try a gluten-free diet for 6 months and maintain a strict diary. Track your symptoms like what joints are affected, what swelling you have, how much morning stiffness you have. Don't expect to notice immediate results. Instead, continue to track your symptoms to see if you have gradual improvement. And if you don't see any improvement, you may resume foods that contain gluten. Number 5, seed oils. Did you know that healthy seed cooking oils might actually cause more harm than good. Let's look at the science behind seed oils. They are high in omega-6 fatty acids, which can promote inflammation when they are consumed in excess, and they are often processed during extraction using harmful chemicals, and through heating, they create other harmful and toxic compounds. So you should avoid using canola oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, or soybean oil. Instead, replace this with avocado oil if you are going to cook at high temperature, or for your salads, you should use olive oil. Because studies show that regularly consuming olive oil will lead to a 30% decrease in your risk to develop heart disease. The components of olive oil, including oleic acid, have natural anti-inflammatory properties, and I always recommend using unfiltered, cold-pressed olive oil in all your salads. In my recent book, Thriving with Rheumatoid Arthritis, I go deeper into this problem, and I explain the scientific value of using healthy fats to decrease inflammation. I hope you will find this book a great resource in your journey with rheumatoid arthritis. Number 4, red meat. When I talk to my patients about red meat, I always insist that quality and quantity matters more than you think. High consumption of red meat was associated with increased markers of inflammation. Plus, processed red meat contains a lot of harmful preservatives and excessive salt. One study in 400 participants that embraced a modified Mediterranean type diet that contained more bread, more roots vegetables and green vegetables, more fish, more fruits, at least once a day, with less red meat, showed a 50 to 70% decrease in the risk of heart disease, the risk of stroke, and the risk of cancer. In patients with rheumatoid arthritis, a recent study published in 2018 in over 1,700 patients with rheumatoid arthritis that were compared with about 4,000 control patients, patients that did not have rheumatoid arthritis, they found out that those who firmly adopted the Mediterranean diet experienced a 21% decrease in their odds to develop rheumatoid arthritis. Plus, there are many other studies that show that people with rheumatoid arthritis that follow a Mediterranean diet have less affected joints, less pain, less inflammation, and improved physical activity or physical function, and overall their disease activity is less. So my advice is to limit red meat to 1 to 2 times a week and choose grass-fed over conventional red meat when possible. And don't forget to add wild-caught fish 3 times a week. And now that we are getting closer to the worst foods for people with rheumatoid arthritis, let's talk about number 3, refined carbohydrates. Do you enjoy white bread, white pasta, white rice, or sugary cereals? Then my advice is to stop doing that immediately. Not only that they will raise your blood sugar levels, but they will increase inflammation in your body and your joints. Plus, they can cause you to gain weight, which will further increase the joint pressure and damage to your joints. A 2020 study showed that patients with rheumatoid arthritis who consumed a diet rich in refined carbohydrates, they had more flare-ups, they had more pain, and increased cardiovascular risk. Now let's move on to the food that is on the second place as being the worst food for rheumatoid arthritis. And this is salt. There is a shocking study about people that consume salt and the rheumatoid arthritis risk. In 2015, this study in 18,000 people showed that consuming more than 3.5 grams of salt every day will increase your risk for developing rheumatoid arthritis. There are some cells in our body that we call T regulatory cells, and they do modulate inflammation. But when you eat excessive salt, the salt will inhibit these cells, and that will result in excessive inflammation. When it comes to people with rheumatoid arthritis, another study published in 2021 showed that excessive salt intake will increase the joint pain and swelling along with hypertension. And there are many hidden sources of excessive salt, like processed foods or some canned goods or restaurant meals or frozen dinners, and even in some condiments and some sauces. Research shows that reducing the salt intake will lower inflammatory markers, will reduce the water retention, and will reduce the joint swelling, and it will improve the response of rheumatoid arthritis, and it will improve the response to rheumatoid arthritis medications. And now, the number one food that you need to put all your efforts into eliminating it is sugar. The average American consumes 57 pounds of sugar every year, which is 10 times more than 100 years ago. Most of us, we consume 300% more sugar than it is recommended. But how did we get here? In the 1960s and 1970s, the food industry, the food manufacturers started to add sugar to anything and everything to make it more taste appealing, because who doesn't love sugary foods? And to keep the food longer on the shelves, because sugar, it's a natural preservative. But did you know that foods with added sugar will increase your blood sugar, will result in insulin spikes, and that will make you more hungry? Research from UK found that drinking beverages sweetened, like sweetened tea or coffee, or eating foods like sweetened cereals are associated with more high blood pressure, more weight gain, more diabetes, heart disease, and very importantly, with more inflammation. But sugar also increases your risk to develop rheumatoid arthritis. This was a study, actually a 20-year study of 100,000 women, that showed that if they drink, or if you drink one soda per day, that will increase your risk to develop rheumatoid arthritis by 63%. And there are many hidden sources for sugar, like breads, pastries, sauces, those healthy breakfast cereals, and many of the energy drinks and many of the juices that you have over the counter. My advice, if you suffer from rheumatoid arthritis, reducing sugar intake will lower your overall inflammation, it will improve your gut dysbiosis, will increase your energy levels, and will decrease the fatigue and the pain. And I know it's very hard to reduce sugar, as sugar, it's like cocaine. It gives you a terrible addiction. So my advice is to start gradually and every week to reduce further the amount of sugar that you eat. You're gonna find a lot of these practical tips in my recent book, Thriving with Rheumatoid Arthritis. And those are tips that I also share with my patients. And now that you know all about these worst foods that will worsen your rheumatoid arthritis symptoms, you should learn about how to replace them with the best anti-inflammatory foods, because if you don't do that, all your efforts are not paying off. And I will explain all of that in this video.